Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast with your host, Andrew Langer.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Lunch Hour with Federal Newswire. I'm your host, Andrew Langer, and this is a very special episode, and I don't mean a very special episode like they would do on shows like Different Strokes or Blossom. I mean a special episode in that this is a celebratory episode. It is the week of July 4th. I'm not sure which day we're releasing this, probably on Monday the 3rd. But it is Independence Day week, a very important holiday in my mind, as big as any of the other holidays, if not bigger, something that we ought to celebrate. And I wanted to do something special today. So joining us here on the Lunch Hour is James Madison, who is a scholar. Well, here, we'll go through your bio just a little bit. Mr. Madison, first of all, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Langer. I am overwhelmed at this remarkable technology that allows us to speak and correspond from such a great distance away.
It is amazing the way that we can make this work. And so for all of you who are watching, we are setting the Wayback Machine to the year of our Lord 1776. But let me read Mr. Madison's biography, because he's got a very auspicious career coming up, as all of you know. He doesn't know this yet, but we're going to get into this in a moment. He was born in 1751 in Port Conway, Virginia. In 1769, he enrolled at the College of New Jersey, which is a college many of you now would recognize as Princeton University. Graduated in 1771 with a degree in philosophy. After graduating from the College of New Jersey, he returned home to Montpelier, his family's home, and studied law. In 1774, he took a seat on the local committee of safety, a patriot pro-revolution group that oversaw the local militia. This was the first stop in a lifetime of public service. In 1776, Madison was elected to the Virginia Convention, which was drafting the state's constitution. He played a key role in the drafting of that constitution, and his ideas about separation of powers and checks and balances would fundamentally shape American governance for decades, if not centuries, to come. Madison's early life was marked by a strong commitment to public service and a deep and abiding interest in political philosophy. And Mr. Madison, let's start there. Let's talk about how you developed this interest in political philosophy and public service.
I should thank you. And thank you for the Vitae Historum. I was slightly afraid you were going to go into the future and ruin the ending for me.
No, I will not do that.
I should say, at this present moment, we, the people of America, have an unparalleled opportunity, an opportunity that philosophy has waited for, that humanity has sighed for from the most remote ages of our common experience. We have the opportunity to choose what form of government we will sit under. Now, I will say, Mr. Langer, from the first moments I was capable of contemplating political principles, I have never ceased wishing success to a well-regulated Republican experiment of government. We see here across this American theater the opportunity to create structures of government that not only best reflect the people for whom the government is framed for, but hold the opportunity to perfect themselves. And so at this present moment, we see the opportunity where a government may be born with the purest of intentions. Now, that is not to say we do not see at this critical moment things that every day go against those same aspirations.
Of course.
But all the same, if we are successful, not only in this revolution, but equally within the war, for they are two different things, well, we will see something that no doubt will not only benefit this American continent, but dare I say, could benefit the entirety of the world, should they follow the example herein set.
So let me ask you this, because to me, the concept of America as an idea, and it always strikes me as wonderful that America is a nation that is bound together by ideas, that's the common thread, that no matter where you come from to come to these shores, we have a certain idea, a series of ideas that bring us all together, namely that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, etc. But that ultimately America is an experiment in aspirations. And I don't mean experiment in the negative sense. I mean that we are constantly working towards striving to be better, to, as one may write down the road, form a more perfect union. That's an aspirational sentiment. What are your thoughts here?
Well, that's a good phrase. You should write that down.
Thank you.
I think you touch upon something incredibly prolific. So you spoke of the separation of powers. An
Yes.
idea which comes and is constituted from Montesquieu. Montesquieu is incredibly prolific in influencing the whole of the American identity. Not only that the powers of government must be separate and distinct from one and the other, but that every government, whether it is a republic, whether it is monarchy, whether it is despotism, has a general spirit that moves it. So at this present moment, we have the opportunity to choose what spirit will unite us. Now, at this present moment, when we speak of the United States, we are not speaking of one nation. We are speaking of a league of nations.
Yes.
13 sovereign states, at present debating whether they will not only be free and independent from Great Britain, but also free and independent from one and the other. United in a loose confederation like the confederations of ancient Greece or the Swiss cantons, the Helvetic League of medieval Europe. This may prove problematic in a decade, but all the same, we have the opportunity to choose what spirit will move us. Now, despotism is fueled by a spirit of fear. Monarchy is fueled by a spirit of honor. Republics, according to Montesquieu, are fueled by a spirit of virtue. But does that fit America? Perhaps, yes, a republic must have virtue. It must have an enlightened citizenry. But when we speak of the greatest unifier of America, what is an identity that can traverse the diversity of opinion and quality of North America? It is that we are a nation of ideas. When we look at this present moment, we do not look to the singular British heritage that has unified us to this point, but rather instead of the ideas that come from this enlightened age. Not only Englishmen like John Locke or David Hume, but also Frenchmen like Montesquieu, Swiss writers like Émeric de Vattel. Suddenly, we are unified in human thought. And so what is the idea of America? The idea is that if a people are enlightened enough, if a people are careful enough, if we devote ourselves to a careful examination of the past, not to venerate the innovations, but to understand the peculiarities, the vices, the distinctions, and indeed the innovations of human nature, you can begin to navigate through the wilderness of human thought and slowly, with tenacity, improve it. Now, why it is an experiment? Because it's not left to a government to do this. It's instead left to an enlightened citizenry. Montesquieu speaks of republics based in mediocrity. Now, it's important to make the distinction. Mediocrity sometimes has a negative connotation, but mediocrity simply means averages. Republics are based on averages. So if a republic should be happy, a people will be happy. If a republic should be immoral, likely it is based on a citizenry that is immoral. If a people are enlightened, a republic will then be enlightened. The idea of America is that a people may be enlightened enough that they will allow a government to progress. Now, where America is aspirational is, at this present moment, we have various things that contradict some of those fundamental thoughts. All men are created equal. Now, we may, through circumlocution, through speaking around it, say, well, by nature, all are created equal, but are not given to the same rights and privileges as other people in society. And therefore, we can justify certain institutions.
Sure.
But all the same, that aspiration comes from placing that trust upon a people that they will adhere to that spirit of improving themselves in society and facilitating mechanisms whereby a people can improve. It will not happen overnight, I suspect, but the opportunity is present.
So let's talk about this, because you're right. These ideals, you can have a despotism, you can have a monarchy, you can have a republic. One of the things I know you are skeptical of is pure democracy. I believe you understand the way that pure democracy can turn into mob rule, mobocracy. But certainly, depending on the average enlightenment of the people in a republic, we need to be guarded against that republic from falling into the despotism. And I want to get your thoughts on one of the ways that we would guard against that by diffusing sovereign power among branches of government and levels of government. There's one of my favorite writers wrote that federalism, which is one of the ways we can look at this, the way we balance out the various branches and levels of government, federalism secures to individuals the liberties that derive from the diffusion of sovereign power. Talk about that.
I should be pleased to. I think it imperative to put forward that any pure structure of government, any structure of government that is easily defined is easily undone. Aristotle expresses this perfectly when he defines democracy, monarchy, and aristocracy. Democracy, in its purest form, quickly degenerates into anarchy, mob vulgaris. Monarchy quickly transcends to tyranny if left unchecked, aristocracy to oligarchy. By purely defining something, by easily defining something, you leave it easily undone. Yes. So from there, you utilize democracy through means of a republic, the channels through which democracy can succeed. In summary, democracy becomes a verb by which you sustain your republic. Now, equally, we can justify this if we utilize democracy over an extended plane to justify a metric for a larger consolidated federal republic. Utilize ambition to counteract ambition. Utilize faction to check faction. You create something that is so incredibly complex that upon occasion it may become somewhat frustrating in its ability to hold tension, but that tension equally becomes its greatest asset in strength.
Absolutely.
My teacher at the College of New Jersey, John Witherspoon, who is at present, in this moment in 1776, a delegate for New Jersey for the Continental Congress, gave a lecture called The Nexus Imperii, the binding of power. He spoke of strands of rope. Now you have a strand of flax upon its own, something which is perhaps strong but easily broken and undone. You bind that together, and suddenly you have a rope not easily broken. Could not the same be said for an American experiment, where suddenly you have, through the extension of the sphere, a multiplicity of factions that exist? To wit, not only a separation of powers, but a separation of function, working together by their interest towards the same aim. And should any interest be counterintuitive, it is simultaneously checked by another interest and ambition.
No, I think that's absolutely true. You have to have what they call checks and balances, and giving no particular entity enough power that they can overwhelm all of the others. And it's one of the great discussions in our time, because we have the three branches of government: the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive branch, is how much power the executive has, and how folks who are what we call bureaucrats in our time, civil servants, would probably be the best paid, but functionaries within the government who are not elected but hired, the amount of power that they have and whether or not that power can be checked. Let me ask you this, because we could go down the road of enumerating rights. The danger, of course, in that is that if you start enumerating rights, people think that those are the only rights that exist. You and I both know that men and women are born with a full measure of their rights intact, and then we cede some of those rights to government in the form of powers. How do we go about, without enumerating specific rights, or do we need to enumerate specific rights? How do we go about making sure that fundamental individual rights are protected?
This is a fascinating question.
Thank you.
At present, in 1776, this convention that we are assembling with at present, in this moment in Williamsburg, Virginia, the first action we took in committee was to create a Declaration of Rights. We are just now, at present, debating and drafting the Constitution after finishing our Declaration of Rights, which we ratified on the 12th of June. 16 articles, 16 enumerated clauses saying what rights we as Virginians are not only entitled to by a government, but bestowed by nature. You begin with natural rights, life, liberty, property, the means of acquiring and possessing happiness, God-given rights. Then from there, the civic rights that protect those various natural rights. Here's the question we arrive at. We drafted this Declaration of Rights. We enumerated certain new radical rights. For the first time in Virginia, we have afforded the free exercise of religion, Article 16. That was accomplished by a fairly freshman, soft-spoken, and exceedingly handsome delegate who, out of honor, I will not name. However, here's the question.
Yes.
When we speak of this right, what measure or what sanction will prevent a people from not violating that right? So let's look and examine Emmerich de Vattel. Emmerich de Vattel is in the hands of almost every congressman now sitting, as I understand. He speaks of the measures society may take to compel a people to respect the rights of their fellow man. Now, the first measure are internal compulsions. Can we not sit astonished that nearly every culture across the quarters of the globe have some law ensuring the protection of the right of life? We can penalize people for murder. We can penalize people for damage done to person. This arithmetically leads us to the conclusion that there is some conscience within us that is universal to respect certain liberties. So those are internal compulsions. Next, we have external compulsions. And in that category, you have perfect and imperfect. Now, perfect are the things by law you can mandate. So, for instance, the right to trial by jury. You can put measures in law ensuring that that right is practiced. If that right is violated, there are measures and sanctions. If there are perfect compulsions, there are equally imperfect. Things you cannot as a government mandate, you can simply ask. So when we speak of a respect for everyone's religion, when we speak of a respect for everyone's opinion, is there any law that can be placed upon a book that can mandate a person to think a certain way? No. In endeavoring to navigate that labyrinth, you inevitably deny that self-same freedom of thought. And so you can declare these various liberties, and you can frame a government around standing for the rights of human nature. But were I to look to the hypothetical future, I could see in, let's say, 10 years' time, when we're debating the, let's say, necessity of a federal Bill of Rights, that I will arrive at the conclusion that it will become a parchment barrier. More than that, that, as you put, an enumeration that is not complete is not safe. If we're to create structures of government that will endure beyond the scope of one lifetime, how do you decide what liberties a people should have ad infinitum? Now, there are certain liberties that have stood the test of time. Justinian, in his Corpus Juris Civilis, said all men are by nature free, and here we are 600 years later saying the same thing.
Yes.
That is a right that likely becomes a universal truth. Yet simultaneously, will we always say certain rights should always be justified to a people? Or will there be better ways? Moreover, what of the rights that, in my time, are not believed to be necessary, but in other times will? There is a gentleman in Philadelphia now sitting, Mr. Thomas Jefferson. Have you heard of him?
Oh, yes. I have heard of him.
I've not met the gentleman, but he is a great source of frustration to a great many of the Virginians in the room at this moment because of his advocacy towards education. It is his belief education is essential. Education is a right. I agree with him, but there are a great many who do not believe education should be an end of government, that they should not pay tax dollars for an education. Now, I don't wish to get into that, but what if, hypothetically, let's imagine generations from now, it is viewed as a universal right. Because it's not enumerated, it should not be guaranteed. Now, I'm not making an argument one way or the other for such structures.
I understand,
as an example of what of the rights that should be decided for tomorrow. And is it better in not enumerating liberty to better secure those rights for the future.
Sure.
Now, I suspect there should come a day where I should make that argument, that I should say an enumeration that's not complete is not safe. And if I do that, hypothetically, 10 years from now, I can see that self-same Thomas Jefferson, who hypothetically, by then, should be my dearest friend in the world, saying that a Bill of Rights is what every people deserve. And that more than that, a half loaf of bread will feed more than no bread at all. And so, in whatever Bill of Rights we should see, I should wish to see some guarantee that whatever rights are not enumerated should equally be protected. And in that, we should be a people who should not venerate 10 rights.
Yes. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. We should be a people who do not venerate 10 rights, 16 rights, but the infinite rights of human nature to be decided now and ad infinitum.
That kind of verbiage is one that I find incredibly compelling. The idea that the enumeration of certain rights is not meant to deny or disparage the existence of others. I'm giving that to you as a possibility. If you do wind up writing that, it's very heady verbiage to me. Before we sort of talk about some other things, I want to, because, we are celebrating American independence, and I want to get your thoughts, Mr. Madison, about why it is important for Americans to celebrate our Declaration of Independence from Great Britain, the revolutionary spirit that drove that. Why is it important to celebrate those things?
At this present moment, you see throughout North America language of tabula rasa, blank slate, according to John Locke. Yeah. You see sentiments of nova ordo seclorum, a new order for the ages, a new way of doing things. This ideology will eventually come to be known as the spirit of 1776. Thomas Paine in Common Sense, the sun never shone on a cause of greater worth. 'Tis not the affair of a city, a province, a country, but of a continent. 'Tis not the affair of a day, a week, an age. Posterity is invested and will be invested to the end of time. Common Sense was meant to be read aloud. You see it echoing through the taverns of North America. The spirit of 1776 is a critical moment in time, but it is an opportunity, a mindset where anything is possible, where everything is new, where with no tradition before us, we have the potential to become anything. That is the spirit of American independence. A people who do not lean on tradition and austerity, but instead are willing to defy it for the necessities of the present moment. And there is power in that, Mr. Langer. There is the opportunity to make history.
Wow. And I'm getting tearful just thinking about that and contemplating that. That's exactly the message that I wanted to have delivered on this Independence Day in my year. Let's peel back the curtain a little bit here. Our guest, obviously, is James Madison, but he is being portrayed by an interpreter at Colonial Williamsburg named Brian Austin. And Brian, how long have you been interpreting James Madison? How did you come to start interpreting for James Madison?
You caught me. I'm not really James Madison. It really is fascinating. It's a fascinating story. So I have been. This is my 11th year playing James Madison, and it's been it's been a fascinating road. I didn't choose James Madison. I came to Colonial Williamsburg completely by accident, and I was lucky enough to become one of the actor interpreters, the people who adopt what's called first-person interpretation, pretending to be someone from the past as a vehicle for education. And James Madison was picked for me. I don't know why. I didn't consider myself to be a particularly intelligent student. I was a very bad student. And suddenly, as from an acting standpoint, which is my background, I fell madly in love with the work. The work became almost the contact sport of performance, where you go out without a safety net, with no script, and you lean in to the circumstances, to the history that you go and you live this person. So I was 25, which is the same age Madison was when he was in Williamsburg in 1776. That little piece of symmetry. You know, I had left college. I wasn't sure what to do with my life. And so I met Madison, not as the father of the Constitution, not as the president of the United States, but as a 25-year-old kid who arrived in this unique, quiet city by accident, just like
wow. Me. Where did you go undergrad? I'm sorry to interrupt, but where did you go undergrad?
Yes,
where did you study theater?
I went to Christopher Newport University, right down the street in Williamsburg in Newport News. I was a theater major. And I was a professional actor for a number of years before I arrived in Williamsburg, and was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I felt like I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to have an impact. I wanted to, you know, I wanted something more than just the curtain coming up, you know, performing in front of an audience and then curtain coming down, and I was missing a connection. I was missing something. So I had an offer to go to Texas to do a summer of Shakespeare. And instead I did what any rational person would do. And I went to college in California. And while I was there, I somehow got a job interview at Colonial Williamsburg.
Wow.
And so that it really, I often say I arrived here completely by accident, but I could not see it working out any other way.
Well, time out. So where did you grow up in Virginia?
I did. Okay. I have the honor of being the only native Virginian who plays a Virginia president here at Colonial Williamsburg.
But my point is, did you do the fourth grade trip to Colonial Williamsburg, as we call it, folks, CW, make candles, have gingerbread, etc.? You did those things? That is
a great question. I did. And you know something that's so remarkable is some of the people who I met on that trip are my colleagues today.
That's wild.
And, you know, I got to have that sort of coming full circle of thanking them, you know, for the feeling I got. Because it's, you know, you come to Colonial Williamsburg and there's a unique sort of hum in the air. There is an intellectual commerce that's happening where you are taking your knowledge and the knowledge of the interpreters here, and you're seeing where they meet. You're exchanging ideas. And there's something really magical about that.
It is not a passive attraction. It is an active attraction that challenges you at every turn. But while we open that up, you know, because I normally would talk to Bill Skirmerhorn, who's the sort of director of special events at CW. And again, we call it CW. And if you're in the know, it's CW. It's not Duke of Gloucester Street, it's Dog Street. What's going on, Dave? I don't know if you can tell us what's going on at CW 4th of July week. It may be too early for that as we're recording this, but what's going on this summer? Why should people come to CW over 4th of July?
It's the place to be, man. It's the place to be. So right now, we are on the road to America's 250th. And more than that, we are honoring really our centennial as an institution. We've literally been pretending to be a colonial capital longer than we were ever a colonial capital, which is a wild thing. But we are on the roadmap to this really amazing, you know, amazing time for America. And Williamsburg, as in the height of the revolution, is not like Philadelphia. It's not like Boston. It is a quiet city where loud history is made. And so the 4th of July in Williamsburg, it's your time to be a part of that. It's your time to reconnect with where you fit in the nation. And it's, regardless of whether it's your first time being here, it's your homecoming as an American citizen.
Brian, is that phrase, it's a quiet city with a loud history, is that an official theme? Because if it isn't an official theme or an official statement or some kind of slogan, that really should be one of the advertising points, because I think that's a very insightful way to do. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was me just now. You going to write that down? Yeah. We're writing it down now. Yeah, that's just the conclusion that I've arrived at.
And I think it's a very astute one in the end. And the great thing about it is, you're right. It's been this colonial capital for almost 100 years in terms of the reenactment, in terms of the preservation. But it is a process that is it itself is an aspirational project that is constantly changing to fit those aspirations. So what may have been, if you were in fourth grade and came to Williamsburg 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, there's something different for you there, isn't there?
There absolutely is. You know, I've been so lucky to have been here for 10 years. So, 10% of Williamsburg's existence, I've been here. And what's so wondrous is that the buildings don't change. The city, there's new buildings coming up, and we're reconstructing. And
there are things that are changing things, all the time.
Really valuable things. But for the most part, so much of it stays the same. But what makes it different are its people and the stories that are being told, and the norms that are being challenged, and the work that's being done, and the depth and degree of curiosity that I've seen in the 10 years that I've been here, of people hungry to understand where they fit in the story, never ceases to amaze and surprise me.
I was just going to say, I will tell you, folks, you need to make your reservations sooner rather than later. I mean, make them, that you will be able to go. I know that my brother literally today texted me and said that he's amazed he cannot get into any of the taverns right now. And he's dying to go. He wants his ale potted beef at Tuning's or wherever. So that's a good sign to me that Colonial Williamsburg is going to be here. Brian Austin, Mr. Madison, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my privilege. I hope to see you all in Williamsburg soon.
I will reach out. Well, thank you all once again for joining us on this week's Lunch Hour with Federal Newswire. I've been your host, and normally I would say have a good week and enjoy your lunch, but I'm going to leave you with this. Happy birthday, America. May you long endure. Have a great week, everybody, and now enjoy the rest of your lunch.
This has been the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast, hosted by Andrew Langer. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream.